Well, we're back.
Yeah, I know it's been a minute.
It's been a little bit.
Yeah.
Took a nice break for the holidays, and now we're ready to kick things back off.
Yeah.
So we've got a few topics that we're going to be covering over the next few weeks that we're excited about. Big topics that I think are going to be helpful for people. And coming out of our Ephesians series, I think it'll be a nice little tag on.
Yeah, I think so. I'm looking forward to it. Getting back, on the horse here, on the grind, and getting into the podcast. We've been getting people asking, well, "Hey, what's going on?" So
yeah.
We're back at it.
Yeah. So this pod, we have Josh and Chrissy Murphy that joined us.
Awesome.
And we were able to talk to them actually during the Ephesians series.
Yeah.
But they have some experience within the marriage game personally, but also from a ministry standpoint.
Yeah.
And so we invited them to the podcast and got to have some good conversation with them, loads of wisdom.
Yep.
And also so much vulnerability too that I appreciate from them.
Yeah, they're real. They're just real and authentic. Makes them very relatable.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I appreciate how they each think too, because they both bring a different viewpoint that is valuable.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be beneficial to anybody listening. Even if, you're not in a marriage, this is good just for any type of relationship because we talk about some really foundational things for any interpersonal relationship. So I think it's going to be beneficial. I hope everybody enjoys it.
Yeah.
How long have you guys been married now?
You want to take this one? It's a running joke.
Uh-oh.
It's 22 years.
22 years.
I'm the one who forgets how long.
Oh, okay.
It's not him, it's me. I've been saying 23 for probably
A bit of a
years
role
now.
reversal then, huh?
Yes.
In that way?
Yeah.
I'm the one who forgot what day he was born on. And
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
in my defense, his birthday is the day after. So I was just getting them
Swapping the day.
That's
reversed.
okay.
So
That's a little better.
You
Yeah.
can go with that.
Yeah, still not great, but it's a little better. And then ministry-wise, how many years specifically in marriage-type ministry?
I mean, I would say 10,
Ish. Yeah.
10-ish?
10-ish.
Yeah.
A little break in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In different expressions and varieties of that, I assume?
Yeah. We started with a financial peace class.
Oh, okay.
We just started a small group with that, and we quickly found out that it is a marriage class packaged as a finance class.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the two often go hand in hand. Yeah.
Communication, figuring things out, talking about things.
Working together
Yeah.
to accomplish something. Yeah.
It was a doozy.
Yeah.
So is that what started things off?
It is.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, is this something that you specifically felt like God was calling you into, or just experientially through marriage, it was like, man, people need help, so maybe this is a need we could fill?
I think for me, it was just more kind of stepping one step led to another. I don't think I've ever felt like we've had some sort of calling to do something. What would you say?
I would say you didn't want to do any of it
Yeah.
at first. You were like, no, I can't do that. And then
I don't like talking to people.
I would say that when we had started having a marriage night, we went for a walk and we were praying, and we did have that discussion and just really felt like God was telling us to take that next step with that. But it was always just like one step at a time.
I think in my short experience so far in ministry, marriage has proven to be one of the main problems or issues that people tend to stumble upon, being able to unite and live life with one another and try to stay on the same page in terms of purpose, decisions, proves to be very, very difficult. So I want to talk a little bit about what we see biblically around this topic. And then I would love to just get into some real stuff of what you guys have been through, maybe some fun stories that you guys would be willing to share. So I'm curious, in your own marriage, maybe what is some of the wisdom that you've gleaned from Scripture on how to operate as a husband or as a wife, or how you operate together? What are some of the initial sections of Scripture that stand out to you guys?
I think for me, probably learning just to listen and learning to love. I think that we are so focused on ourselves as people, especially when we're younger and when we get married. Our only experience that we have is ourselves and our family, and then we bring somebody new into it. And it's hard to make that transition from me to us. And for me, I think, learning to love, loving your wife as Christ loved the church, I think that's probably been the most challenging yet helpful scripture. There's a lot in there of how to love your spouse as Christ loved the church, sacrifice. It's not all about you. It's about your family and your wife and learning them and how to love them well. I mean, Jesus knows how to love us well. So how do we learn to love our wives well?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
For me, I would say it was learning that I can't change him. I could only change me. Because like Josh had said, you're so focused on yourself and you think that you're right all the time. And it was like I was just trying to change him and overlooking my own faults, all the planks in my own eye, and I could only see his. And so I was completely blind to that. And so I had to humble myself and learn that I needed to make a whole lot of changes and being more loving. And with like my personality, I'm very straightforward and a go-getter. And so like my prayer has been, God, help me to soften. And I know most people are like, soften? Or yes, because I want my words to be soft, learning how to be a soft landing place for my husband instead of harsh words. And that was a complete 180 from what I was like. So
that's really good. Just considering like, okay, who I am, my natural tendencies. Okay, now Lord, shape me into more of you. That's really good. Humility was, you used that, and you were basically saying that as well. Humility is something that just screams out loud to me. Because like you said, you're going from me to us, and I struggled for sure at that. When we first got married, I would invite friends over to come watch the game Friday night. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell the wife like an hour beforehand, and she's like, "We haven't cleaned the house," and
God
so
bless her.
Yes, exactly. I killed that. But love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't keep score. I think that's a big one as well that comes to mind for me, scripturally. Just not keeping score, because how much do we think inside our head? Well, I did this, why can't you do that? And again, back to humbling myself, but humility is a big one for me.
I think along those lines that, you said it's hard, but it's easy at the beginning because we feel like we've met this person that is kind of like fills all the blanks that we have.
And maybe not everybody. For us, like...
I married my opposite, right?
Yeah.
And most people do.
Yeah.
Like you marry the person that's, I'm the soft-spoken, the quiet person. She's the go-getter. Let's talk about everything. And I'm like, it'll just work out. She's like, let's make a plan. And so, the coming together, and it's like, oh, well, that's great. She can do some of those things. And then
We're like a perfect puzzle
we're
piece.
like this perfect puzzle piece. And then
so cute.
it works out great for like, a couple of years. And
Hot
then it's
second.
like, man, why can't you just like not be that way and be more like me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because my way's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting because I hear both sides. Like either it's polar opposite. Either first year of marriage was great, honeymoon phase, or it was terrible. And maybe that has something to do with it. If you marry somebody who's opposite of you, maybe there is that honeymoon phase.
Maybe so.
I think for me, my wife and I are actually quite a bit alike.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for us, maybe, we enjoyed getting to live life together, but in terms of just like the everyday things that needed to be done, decisions that need to be made, I do think we kind of stumbled our way into that because we think a lot alike. And so it was difficult to come together without feeling like my voice isn't being heard. So I think that was our experience early on.
I would say Tara and I are more like you guys, opposites for the most part. It's interesting as you say that because there were things that we struggled with up front with those differences. And it was mainly like, how we functioned, but learned to appreciate that as time went on. But then on the flip side, I think there are things that you thought were cute early on in relationship that as time goes on, you're like, okay, and so I see that both ways, but just like with different things.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Ephesians 5, because that's a big section where we see a lot of wisdom around what it looks like to be a Christ-like husband, a Christ-like wife. So initially, when we open up Ephesians 5, we see the concept of submission, starting with mutual submission and then into the role of wife. And so, Chrissy, how do you understand what Paul is saying here in terms of how you function as a wife and what that looks like even in your everyday life?
That's a good question. I think for me, and probably my personality as well, it was huge for me to learn that I couldn't railroad him. Mm-hmm. And that might sound silly, but I didn't even realize I was doing that at first, but just he's my husband, and what I want is not the only voice that matters. And so learning to submit to him as an equal, my husband. So, there's women with different personalities. Either they're ultra meek and they don't have a voice, or we tend to fall in one of two categories. That's kind of how it goes, is one, they don't have a voice, or there's the opposite where they're ultra voiced. That would be me. And so I had to learn how not to railroad Josh and to say, hey, what do you think? And then ultimately it's okay. I had to learn to trust him, that he could lead. And okay, so if I disagree with him, then it's okay, well, you are the head of this house and I've let you know my opinion. I'm not afraid to, and that's important for us to have an opinion. So to share that, because that is a role that God has given us. And if you disagree, then okay, I'm going to trust that you hear from God too. Mm-hmm. I'm not the Holy Spirit, and I'm, you can hear from God too. And if it works, then it works. And if not, then I'm sorry. So it's really just coming back to trusting him and trusting God.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that spectrum, when that trust has been given, I'm curious how you've handled that. I mean, do you feel that is pressure for you to do the right thing if maybe the wrong decision is made? You know what I mean? Like, how have you handled that?
So again, my personality is it's all going to work out. It's going to be okay. But yes, it's a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time we had built our first house, and
she's excited about
I
this.
was
Whatever.
literally thinking this story in my
Yeah.
head. I'm like, oh my gosh,
it was
good example.
Well, we were young and dumb and built a house when we couldn't afford it.
Okay.
And so plus I had a job transition, and it was just tight. It was super tight. And I'd really felt like God said, you need to sell your house. It's time to sell your house. And we'd only lived there 2 years, maybe right around 2 to 3 years. It was brand new.
Oliver.
I mean, we'd only been married like 3 or 4 years at that point. And it was kind of like our quote unquote dream house. I mean, we were young and didn't really know, but I mean, it was brand new for us, and it was awesome. But for me, it was just pressure of like affording this place. But I was trying to make it work, and because I wanted to make sure I was providing for Chrissy and she got what she wanted, and that we were happy. But I really felt like God, after a while, said it's time to sell. And so I talked to her about it. And again, we had babies. Like we had 2 babies, one on the way.
Yes, I was pregnant.
And I was like, I feel like we need to sell this place. And she was not happy with that decision.
I did not take that very well.
But she did trust me in those early years. And it was tough in those early years.
I cried a lot.
You cried a lot.
But
we sold it, and we rented for a year after that. I went through a job transition. We had a baby, and we rented an apartment, 3 kids in an apartment.
Yeah.
And we end up moving. I got another job transition. We ended up moving out of state, but it was right before a market crash in our area, and we moved right in time to like not lose money on our house.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, God was definitely faithful. Like in the moment, I was kicking and screaming, but looking back at it, had we not sold right then, we would have been stuck with that house in the market crash.
Yeah.
And then 2, because we were in an apartment, while that was super hard, you got a phone call like a week before we were supposed to re-sign the lease, being offered a job. And had we not been in the apartment that I didn't want to be in, we could not have picked up and moved that quick.
But in the moment, that was tons of pressure. I'm making the wrong decision. My wife is not happy. It is miserable for all of us. And you don't really see the fruit of that till a couple of years later. And you're like, oh, well, God was in that.
Yeah.
That was a huge lesson for me.
And that was, I'm assuming, a very big trust builder, looking back, knowing that, okay, he was following the Lord's lead in that. And I mean, we would all say that we work together throughout that whole process and, seeking guidance from the Lord ultimately. But, it's a rare circumstance where, it's a big decision, not seeing eye to eye. Like to me, that's very rare for us. Most of the time, there's an alignment once it's all said and done. Once we've sought Him, prayed on it, come back together, it's extremely rare when we're not seeing things the same way.
I would agree. I don't think we have moments like that very often. I mean, it's only been a couple of times in our marriage that we've had those types of situations.
Yeah. For us. Now, I will say there's a lot of people out there that struggle in this area, and agreeing or having trust in this area is a hard thing. So it's one of those things that you have to grow and mature in.
When you say that, I almost think it's because they're trying to get their voice heard.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I think it goes back to a communication thing because they don't feel heard. So they're fighting to try to get their voice heard. And so if the communication was built up and they learned how to communicate better, I don't think that there would be as many big issues like that. I
agree. And I think that, we find it easier and easier as our relationship grows because, we're maturing, we're, building more and more trust. So as time goes on, it becomes easier and easier. But I think it's because earlier on, when we were more immature individually and in our relationship, it was more of like what I want versus what we really need. What's right versus what I want. And so I think we've been able to decipher that, as we've grown and matured.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about communication because in my experience, I feel like my wife and I are always trying to grow in this area. And neither of us are chatterboxes. So just naturally, we're a little bit more like Josh, laid back. So for us, it takes intentional work and effort to communicate back and forth. So with the rhythms of how your relationship has gone, and especially you being extremely communicative, how has that kind of moved throughout the course of your marriage? And Josh, nowadays, do you feel it easy to communicate, to express your feelings, whatever it might be?
No, I don't. It's easier because I have practice in it. But again, I'm not a share my feelings kind of person. It takes me a moment to kind of gather my thoughts and put things together. That's just kind of how I am. But I have to be super intentional. Like we went to breakfast the other day. We hadn't been out in a while. And we went out to breakfast, and like going into it, I was like, okay, I got like 2 or 3 things I should probably share. It's been a bit. And I just kind of talked through a few things, but it's super hard for me. I'd rather just kind of sit back and go with the flow.
So for you, do you almost have to create specific times and spaces?
Yes.
To...
Yeah. So I think I've got 2 things I'm going to try to remember. Mm-hmm. So number 1 is like when we're talking and I'm being intentional, like I can't just like, it can't just be at the dinner table. Like we're all sitting there. It's like, I have to have space and like, I'm like mentally prepared. That I don't know if you're like that, but it's like, I've got to make myself like mentally prepared to have this like heartfelt conversation because it's like hard for me.
Yeah.
So that's just me. The second thing is that you had said something that I had to learn, that you like to work things out as you talk through them. And for me, so my personality is I don't talk about them till I've gotten them figured out, mm-hmm. right? She's just talking about them. Mm-hmm. So that tells me, here's a list of things you need to fix real quick.
Yeah.
And there's been several times that Chrissy's like, I don't need you to fix me right now. Just listen. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, but I got this all figured out for you. If you just listen to me. But that's not what she needs. Like, so again, that goes back to learning your spouse. And it took me a long time, but I finally, and it's still like, we'll still have conversations. And I'm like, I got this figured out for you. If you just,
but we do communicate. And I will say, okay, can you tell me what your thoughts are? Can you help mm-hmm. me? Fix me if you can fix me. Like, and because I know that that's what he is like. Yeah, and good. So on this side of it, I know what to say. And that's part of when you're growing together and you're learning each other. It's not hear my voice. You know, I mean, I think that's what we do in our marriage. It's like, hear me, figure me out. And we humble ourselves to learn our spouse. And so knowing that that's his personality, now, okay, now I know how to help him. It's, you don't need to fix me right now. I just need to talk about this. Or, hey, what's your thoughts on this? Mm-hmm. Or in a room of people, when I know he has a hard time, I'll just kind of put my hand on his back or something, and I'll just look to him and say, hey, do you have any thoughts on this? Yeah. To stop the conversation to give him a second to say something. So it's really about learning your spouse and really good. Preferring them over yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things that she did for me, and again, this is all trial and error. We've not had a perfect relationship, and we've just by any means we've worked it out. But like sometimes when we were kind of struggling with this, she would say, I don't need you to fix me. I just need to talk about this. And then that kicks my brain into oh, hey, I don't have to fix this. I just need to sit here and listen and not respond until she's ready for me to respond.
Yeah.
So that was super helpful. I mean, giving your spouse clues like that of like, this is what I need, or I'm about to say something and I don't need a response, or I do need a response, or, you know, giving your spouse clues of what you need is super helpful.
Now, I'm the type of person that if there's that conflict between us, I want to resolve the conflict. Tara doesn't like, she kind of withholds it at first. What about you guys? Like, have you worked, is there a similar dynamic for you guys?
Yes. There's just certain ways that I didn't want to do marriage. And one of them was I'm like, we are not going to fight. Like, going into it, that's just it. Like, I've had some examples of that growing up, and I'm like, we're just not going to fight. So for me,
when you say fight, you're meaning actual like yelling, screaming, slamming doors,
right,
those types of things.
And for me, I guess, so I guess that equated to disagreements maybe in my head as well. So when we would have heated emotions, I will say emotions between us, because I would not engage. Like, I'm just like, we're not gonna go there. And I would just be mad and I would not say anything. And you would be mad and like, you need to talk to me. We need to work this out. And I'm just like, but again, I had to learn to open myself up and engage with the process.
So our process now, which it's crazy because we don't really have as many arguments or anything like that anymore. I think as you begin to grow, it becomes less and less, you know. But our process really now is, if he needs a few minutes, then he will let me know. I need to think about this for a few minutes. Let's get back to this. And he does come back. Mm-hmm. And because he needs time. And I have learned that I need to just shut up, because I will just keep going. And it's like, this is not helping my cause. It's making it worse. So I just need to be quiet. Mm-hmm. If I ask a question, I don't need to ask 5 questions. We're going to ask 1 question, be quiet, give him time to answer that question, and then we'll go to the next one. So it's really just going back to, this is his personality. Yeah. Stop trying to change him and work with it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, I probably relate more with you. I want to resolve any conflict. I just have this feeling within me that if there's conflict between us and I know it, I just like, I've got to resolve this. And so I would try to approach Tara with that, but she would either not take the bait, or if she had hit her thresholds, she would then, you know, let me know all the things that she had been, you know, kind of thinking about. And so through our process of trial and error, I learned that I need to give her time and space so she can articulate her thoughts in a way that's not going to come off. If she reacts with emotion, you know, it'll be more sharp than I'm going to want to hear anyway. And then, you know, for her to realize, like, you can't sit on this for a week. Like, we're talking like 30 minutes or something like that. That's more reasonable, that we can come back together and we can resolve it. But I also think through arguments, sometimes it can be an approach of just like, I need to get this off my chest so I can feel better, without the end in mind of, no, we're trying to resolve something. We're trying to come together on this and grow through it, rather than me just spouting out to feel better what's, you know, what feelings I have. So I think having the end in mind is really important to as a couple to realize as well.
For sure. I think it goes back to like the concept of the two becoming one. And like how we began this discussion, it is so hard to switch your mentality from the one to the other. And I think those are great examples of, well, I want this.
Yeah.
You want something different. And somehow we have to resolve this. Somehow we have to, both of us, we have to figure out what the end result is going to be. And I still feel like in my marriage, there are times and seasons where I still struggle with that, where I know what I want, and I also know how I feel like we can get there. And if there's any resistance or any disagreement, then I still struggle with the concept of how are we going to figure this out.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw this out there because as we're sitting here talking about it and just coming back to if we approach marriage with the thought of, I mean, we think that marriage is supposed to be making us happy.
Yeah.
But what happens if we actually approach marriage with, it's to make us holy? God uses marriage to make us holy. And so when we approach it that way and we're in these conflicts and we're, thinking about these things, it's like, okay, what is it that I need to change? What is God working on here? I mean, he takes these two different people and we're supposed to become one. I mean, we're like these rocks and we're almost like sandpaper to each other, rubbing each other raw, like smooth. But he's using our spouses to smooth us out, to make us more like him. I mean, he does that with our kids. He does that with other relationships.
Yep.
But I think that in our marriage, because we're so close and that's who we spend most of our time with, we tend to just take it for granted.
Yeah.
That's how come we tend to dump our stuff on them or we yell at them easily, where we wouldn't be yelling at somebody else like we would our spouse.
Yeah.
Because I think we forget that, hey, God's trying to use this to make me holy.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good Disney movie, and I feel like they've kind of made it hard. The princess idea of it's the forever after kind of deal, and it just gets better, and the castle, and you're just walking up in the sunset, and if you just look at kind of the marriage cycle, I mean it's kind of runs that way in our culture, the American culture of like we fall in love and we have the feelings, and then a couple years in it gets hard, and then you suck it out, and but what is it? 7 years is kind of that average. We hit the wall, divorce kind of year, and people don't realize how much work marriage actually is, and like Chrissy was saying, it is to make us grow up, and if we don't go into it with that mindset, then we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure.
Yeah. There's not an ending. There's not the happy ever after. Somebody had asked us one time, like they were thinking that our marriage was going to be like, okay, we got married, we had a disagreement, like it was an arc, and then we hit the plateau, like, oh, we're good now. It's like, that's really not what it's like. It is a journey. And when you think about hiking on a mountain and you're like climbing, that is more what it's actually like.
Yeah. To me, marriage, the number one thing with marriage is commitment. And people might say, no, it's love. Well, love is commitment. That's what love is. And like you said, in our culture today, we think love means feelings,
right?
The emotions. And that plays a part in it for sure. There's so much goodness in that. But we think that is ultimately what should govern the relationship. And so if the feelings are gone, then we're out. And I think in our culture, it would do us well to switch our mentality on what love is, what it means to actually join with somebody else in a covenant. And that really means that we are one. And so if there is a disagreement, if I don't like something, then we have to figure this out.
Yes.
There's no other, we're committed to each other. That's it. We have to figure this out. I know that there are circumstances that could lead to different results, but in general, I think that's an area we need to grow desperately.
Yeah. I'm currently reading John Mark Comer's Loveology, and I know you've read it. Have you guys read that by chance?
We have not. I was actually just gonna look that up the other day. I just heard he had one.
It's really good. So far anyway, I think I'm about halfway through, but he really points to the, two becoming one. And one of the things that was really refreshing to me is we're made in God's image. And we talk about at church all the time, like, we're bringing heaven to earth, bringing his kingdom to earth. And the marriage is meant to do that together. It's meant that we are now together, going on mission together through the rest of life to bring his kingdom to earth. And that uniting as a couple with that intentionality together was just another element of marriage that I really appreciated that he covered, is becoming one to accomplish the Lord's work and calling on all of our lives. So I thought that was really special.
Well, yeah. In other words, there's purpose in a marriage. It's not just to make me happy. That's not the purpose of marriage. And if that is your pursuit, then good luck.
You're going to be sadly mistaken. Yeah.
But the purpose of marriage, ultimately, as we look back to Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, is that apparently in that covenantal relationship, we reflect God in a unique, peculiar, holy way.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that is a purpose that we should remind ourselves of daily in how we interact with one another and how we see one another.
Yeah.
I love in the Passion Translation, and I think it was Ephesians 4, it's 4 or 5. It was in one of those two it said that the marriage is meant to be a vivid example of Christ. And I love that picture of we are supposed to be a vivid example of Christ loving the church and to other people. And so just taking that thought and does my marriage look like that?
Yeah.
Is the way I'm treating my spouse.
Yeah.
Does it look like the way that Jesus loves us?
If you have kids, does your marriage represent Jesus to your children?
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, which is a humbling thing that I often think about.
Well, because they're learning how to love their spouse as well.
Absolutely. Or what they desire in a spouse. Yeah.
I'm just going to brag about my husband here. I was talking to my daughter the other day, and she was talking about some friends of hers who are in some not healthy relationships. And these friends don't have fathers that love them well or have marriages that love each other well, like the example that we're talking about. And my daughter is in a relationship and he treats her well, and it's a good relationship. And I was just like, wow, I just want you to know that this, and you see this because your father loves you well, and you see how well your father loves me. And it was just this like, wow, he's done a good job.
Yeah.
Job.
You done good.
Good job, honey.
Good job.
Attaboy.
No, man, that's, I mean, what else could you hope for, right?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit. We mentioned trust earlier, which is, that's huge in a marriage. But trust gets broken, and in big ways and in small ways. And when trust gets broken, we see the necessity for forgiveness. And so in your experience, or maybe with some of the folks that you've worked with in the past, man, how is forgiveness given, received? How do we move forward when trust is broken? What does that look like?
I think forgiveness is learning to be forgiven is a tough thing to learn, and then learning to forgive, especially when you've been hurt. So for me, part of my story is I was addicted to porn for a little while, and kind of started when I was in my teenage years, and the good old internets came along. And I've always, I'm a Christ follower. I'm working through this, dealing with the guilt and shame of all of it. And I thought when we got married, it would be better. And it was for a bit. And then it kind of went backwards. And
yeah,
I don't know, we were 10 years in to our marriage-ish. And really, we were doing a lot of growing. We'd been through the really hard season of
we had already done some layers. God was already peeling some layers out, working on us.
We were a few layers in at this point, and I felt like I was like, okay, it's time. You need to go talk to her about this. And I'm like, nope, don't want to do this. And but I
wouldn't want to talk to me about it
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
I mean, and just to
yeah. So I don't remember how it came about, but I just remembered, hey, there was an afternoon, and I was like, I don't think the kids were home. I think it was just us. And I said, I need to talk to you. I've got some stuff I just need to talk to you about. And so I talked to her and kind of shared my story with her. And I mean, I could just see the life drain out of her face of like, you're not the person that I thought you were. And where's the integrity in the person that I thought that I'd married, And it was really hard to ask for forgiveness for that.
Yeah.
On this end of it.
So on the flip side of that story, I guess I had already thought, I wonder if this is an issue. And I had brought that up a couple of times in our marriage. Is this an issue? Is there something, And he would always say no. And so when he brought this up, it was like, it felt like a punch to my gut. Like I just was unprepared because we were already working on our marriage. We were doing things, but it all made sense because it was like we kept hitting this wall. Like I knew that we were supposed to be getting closer and like we were trying to, but something just, there was always like this invisible wall there.
Mm-hmm.
And I clearly remember, I feel like this is so far removed from who we are now and who you are. Like even to hear you talk about this, it's like, I don't even remember this person, but I remember how I feel and exactly what God said to me. Like, I just remember like, oh my gosh, like I felt cheated on, like and then the second thing is I heard the Holy Spirit directly say, watch what you say because you are either going to make or break him right now. And it was like, it was so real, like these opposing, like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what to do with this right now. Like it was.
Yeah.
So
and to follow up on that, like we just didn't leave it at that. So to rebuild the trust, we had to put a lot of barriers in place and a lot of boundaries and accountability. And so it wasn't just hey, I messed up, you got to forgive me. It was like, okay, I messed up. Thank you for your forgiveness. How can we work through this?
Yeah.
It wasn't we weren't one and done and just move on.
Right.
Yeah. It's not like we're going to keep going around this mountain over and over. It was, we're going to work on this. Yeah. And that's what when you're asking for forgiveness for something, if you're truly repentant, then that means you're going to change your behavior. It doesn't mean that you're not going to mess up or you're going to have mistakes, but that's not who you want to be, and you're going to be changing your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you're not actively trying to do that, then you're not really repentant.
Yeah,
sure.
And that's for, whatever situation we're in.
I appreciate you guys sharing that and being vulnerable in that way, because I think that that is needed to be heard. And it almost sounds like I'm listening to my story as you guys talk. Same exact thing. Teenage years, struggled, was addicted, was bound. I just felt the heaviness of it. And it was really frustrating. I tried to work through it myself because I did not want to ask for forgiveness from Sarah as well. And I was actually on my way home from work listening to a sermon, and in the middle of this guy's sermon, he stopped, and I was like, did I lose connection or what? And he said, you need to tell her tonight. And I was like, what? Like, okay, I guess it's time. And so I did the same thing. You pull her into the bedroom, talk to her. It was excruciating, but thank God that she, like you, did forgive and showed so much grace. And I want to just say that because that is exactly what broke me from my bondage of my addiction. The grace that my wife showed me is the power that broke this addiction that I had throughout my teenage years into my young adult years that I could not shake. But it was her forgiveness and the way she showed me the love of Christ. And as you said, that led to a lot of work, a lot of building back of trust. But through that process, it led to a much stronger relationship. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
What I love so much about that, though, is we throw around words like love and grace and forgiveness all the time. But the power of that just goes beyond words. I mean, that is where freedom takes place. That is where restoration happens. And we can't pull those things apart. Yeah. With one comes the other.
Yeah.
And bringing the light to the darkness.
Yeah. Beautiful examples of that.
Yeah, I mean, how often those small moments of like we get to receive a little bit of Jesus from our spouse, or we get to be Jesus to our spouse in that moment of like, it's okay. I got you.
Beautiful. I mean, even in that, just going back to that story, I mean, from a woman's perspective, like giving the grace, but then, you know, the next day when the reality hits and me having to learn to trust Jesus, like it was hard and beautiful all at the same time.
Yeah.
Just the grace that he was giving to me as well. Wow. Through that apparently I had put way too much of my trust in him only. And God was showing me, hey, I'm here. He is not your source. I am your source.
Wow, that's great.
And so God's just so faithful.
Yeah.
He's just so good and so faithful.
Well, Dustin, you said early on that in ministry, marriage is probably the number one issue that we tend to deal with and hear about and try to work with people on. And I just really would want to encourage all those relationships that do feel like they're hanging by a thread to think through some of the things discussed, because there is hope with God. I mean, like, it's amazing how he can turn something that seems so broken and not only restore it, but bring it to something so much more beautiful than it ever was. And we have stories of those in our church as well, that they learned to humble themselves, to trust in the Lord, begin to build the trust in one another to the point where their relationship is thriving, you know, better than it ever was. And so not to cave in so easily, but to bind together, put your trust in the Lord, and know that with him, this is the business he's in, you know, is taking broken things and making them whole.
I don't think there's any marriage that's too far gone that God cannot fix if they are willing and humble.
Right. Yeah. If both are willing, and I just had the hope that it's possible.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, because I do think there's always the flip side, I also think we need to make sure that we humble ourselves enough to think that we're not too good that it can't go wrong.
Yeah.
I've seen good marriages
It's true.
that have ended after many, many years.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Because they had too much pride to humble themselves to make sure that they're keep working on it and keep, working on their marriage and moving forward. But then I've seen those marriages that you would think that there is no way on God's green earth that this is going to work.
Yeah.
There is way too much trust that has been broken, and they are thriving now because they wanted to, they humbled themselves and they brought light in there. They brought, God's goodness and just laid it all out. And the dark, there was no more hidden corners.
Right.
And now they're thriving.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. It's very true. So we've mentioned this to our community already, and we're already promoting it. But starting the first Friday night in February and every month thereafter is going to be what we're calling Better Together. You guys will be leading a group of folks who are in relationships, and it's going to be an opportunity for them to hang out, get community, but also grow. And so maybe talk a little bit about your vision there, what that might look like, and what you ultimately hope to see come from it.
Yeah, so we're going to do the first Friday night every month at 7 p.m. It's a very casual group, so we will have lots of time for community because we think community is important, to meet other couples that are maybe share same interest or share same kind of age groups. Maybe you got kids together, you can find somebody.
Find your people.
Find your people. Because
Mm-hmm.
community is important, especially in your marriage.
Yeah.
We'll do a little teaching, some like group time, so everybody can kind of talk and get to know each other. What else?
We're just going to be sharing practical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're not ultra spiritual people per se. We're hands-on. Like let's talk about, okay, what does this mean? What does this scripture mean? And what does that actually look like in our marriage? And one of the things that we are committed to is to making sure that we have something practical for couples to take home, to practice healthy marriage practices. Like we're going to be working on having a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for us to make sure that we're hanging around other people who are working on their marriage, because who you hang around with, I mean, that's what we tell our kids, right?
Yeah.
But it is so true. Who you hang around with is who you become like.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if you're hanging around people who are working on their marriage, who are living life the way that you want to live life, then that's who you're going to become like. I mean, and if we're all growing together, I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
How great would that be?
Yeah, and if your marriage is in a bad spot, this is a great place to come and then go find that person that has a great marriage that you want to be like and go sit next to them because that's how you're going to learn. I mean, that's what we did. We found a couple that was older than us and we're like, let's go.
We're going to follow you around and we're going to.
We actually called them. We're like, hey, can we take you to lunch? And so we took them to lunch and we're like, all right, not to like creep you out or anything, but we want to hang out with you all. So like, what can we do? Like, how do we make this work? Can we go to dinner? Or like, can we come to your house? Or we just want to ask questions because we had little ones and we were young in our marriage. And it was like, you guys have been around the block and we want to know how to do this.
I love the intention with that, that you guys saw that and wanted that and stepped into it. So just really quick, real fast, off the top of your head, each one of you, what's your favorite topic that you guys cover?
I don't know. I think I just enjoy being challenged.
Okay.
There's always something new to learn. When we teach these, I always learn something new. And I'm just kind of a well-rounded, let's figure it all out.
Bro, yeah.
Would you like to answer yours now?
He's like, I know.
I
love talking about sex.
Yeah.
And I love even saying it because my husband gets red. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And usually, we'll always let people know, okay, next week. And they're like, we're talking about sex. And they kind of freak out. They're so nervous about it. But it's really a good time. And just,
I love it.
We just like having a good time.
But it's for, so this will be for if you're in a relationship, like you could be dating, maybe engaged.
I would say serious dating.
Serious dating, yes. If you're 50 years in, you've got a great marriage, we want to talk to you.
Yes.
So come by. But yeah, it's for anybody that's in a serious relationship, and that wants to learn to grow.
Get a babysitter. We're going to have a list at church of babysitters at our church. So pick up the paper.
Awesome.
Call. Get a babysitter set up first Friday of every month.
Well, I know Tara and I are excited about it.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, it's been great.
Well, episode 7 is in the books.
Yes, sir.
We are locked in. We had a blast with the Murphys.
Great
so
time.
much wisdom, and hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I'm pumped about the Better Together group.
For sure. Like Tara and I are excited to be a part of it. It's coming up soon, so February 7th.
Yeah.
Make sure that you do not miss it. It's incredible.
Yeah. So we are just going to continue to move forward with the topics that you guys have sent us, some big ones that are coming up. We're going to be talking to more people within our community. So just make sure that you go out there, you like, subscribe, put on those notifications so that you see when these come out. And we're so excited to move forward.
Yeah, let's continue to grow together, be more like Christ. And like we talked about today, we want to all grow in our relationships. We want marriages that thrive, relationships that thrive. So let's step into it all together.
Yep.
We'll see you guys.
Love you guys.